ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति 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 Om Sai Ram, dear brothers and sisters, Sai Bhaktas. My last video I stopped at the earning God's love. The Lord said in the Gita, develop steady and unwavering devotion for me and you will become very dear to me. Now I will start this video. Baba's discourse start like this. Embodiments of love. In the world, you can earn money, you can gain wealth and property, you can attain honor and prestige, you can gain position and power. All these are rewards you can attain from your worldly endeavors. But the Lord declared in the Gita that these are but temporary fruits. They are transient and have no lasting value. The only thing that you can attain through your life here on earth that is of real value, that remains with you permanently and eternally, is the love of God. This divine love is extraordinary. No price can ever be set upon it. It is a treasure that is valuable beyond all measure. You must make every effort to discover the means for acquiring this precious love of God. The love of God. God's love is unconditional. It is the same for all. But what must you do to experience this extraordinary love of God? What path should you follow? If you sow some seeds without first weeding and properly preparing the field, you cannot expect to get a good crop. In the same way, in the field of the heart, unless all the bad traits of selfishness are first removed, you will not get a good crop. In the Gita, it is taught that the principal weed that has to be removed from the field of the heart is the attachment to and identification with the body. Even now, you may imagine that you love God, but merely having this thought will not produce any worthwhile results for you. It is like sowing good seeds in barren, unprepared land. The most important thing for you to find out is if you are dear to God. Even if you love God, if you have not transformed your life to become very dear to Him and feel His boundless, unvarying love, then your devotion will not have taken you very near. What then is the way to become dear to God? You will find the answer to this question in the Gita, in the chapter on the path of devotion. The chapter on devotion gives a number of human qualities that are very pleasing to God. It speaks of being resolute and being making a firm commitment to practice only the spiritual teachings in your daily life. It puts great emphasis on developing steadiness of mind under all circumstances and it enjoins you to be fully contented and joyful at all times under all conditions. What is the inner meaning of this last directive? True joy. Consider the feeling you get from singing devotional songs at the spiritual function. If a song is being sung that is not very familiar to you or whose melody is not especially pleasing to your ear, or if you are not drawn to the particular aspect of the divinity to which it is being sung, you might find that you have very little real feeling toward the song. You merely follow the song perfunctorily with your lips. What a great difference between that and a song which you love, which comes from the very core of your heart. emerging freely, spontaneously with a great deal of joy, fi- filling you with rapture and devotion for God. In the same way, there is a vast difference between the temporary joys you derive from this apparent world and its transitory objects and phenomena, and the true joy that emerges from the depths of your heart. The latter joy is totally different from the temporary satisfaction you get from worldly things. This deep joy coming from the heart is associated with the truth. It is permanent, it is detached from all transient worldly concerns. It represents the unity of the spirit. For this joy there is no possibility of change. There is nothing that can be added to true joy. It is full and complete in itself. True joy comes from equanimity. Do not be carried away by or attach any importance to worldly things. Use your time and effort to control the vagaries of the mind and develop mental steadiness. Equal mindedness means that you remain unaffected by victory or defeat, by profit or loss, by joy or sorrow. Accept whatever happens, whatever comes your way as the gift of God to be enjoyed with great satisfaction, regarding it as a gift of love given to you for your own good. When your heart is not swayed by worldly things, when you treat all people and all things with equal mindedness, then you will experience true joy. Then your heart will be filled with feelings of love and satisfaction, and you will know the true joy of devotion, courage, and steadiness. Another important quality that every devotee must possess is to be resolute and courageous. It is completely natural for you to have courage and a firm resolve. You can manifest these qualities in a number of ways in life. You may use these attributes to climb mountains. The same sense of adventure and courage may be used for crossing the ocean or traversing through wild jungles. You may also behave in a courageous and resolute manner in earning wealth, acquiring properties, and making a profit. Or you may be brave and courageous but manifest these qualities in a merciless manner. You may choose to abandon all the noble qualities of humanity and divinity and instead acquire the of a qualities of a demon. This firmness and resolve may be used either for good or for bad. How you use these good God qualities depends upon you. Earlier in life, Earlier in his life, the great sage Valmiki was Ratnakara, the despicable robber. At the time, he was using all his courage, prowess, and firmness in an evil way. Thanks to his association with the seven sages and listening to their teachings, advising him to constantly repeat the name of God, he was able to transform his life and use his strong determination and powers for the good of mankind. Soon he had the name of Rama constantly on his tongue. That is how he became the author of the Ramayana, the great epic recounting the life of Rama. Therefore, you should not use your steadiness and firmness in doing bad things or even for ordinary worldly things. Instead, use your courage and resolve to acquire the grace of God. Worship of God with and without a form. In the chapter on devotion, Krishna expounds on the worship of God both with and without a form. The Gita compares these two modes of worship and points out which is better, which is easier and safer for devotees at each stage of their spiritual progress. The Gita declares that it is impossible to realize the formless and attributeless divine principle except by going through the stage of worshipping God with form and attributes. As long as you have attachment to your body and remain steeped in body consciousness, you will not be able to understand and reach the formless aspect of the Supreme. You attain the necessary qualifications to worship the formless only after you have overcome your attachment to the body, your attachment to the world, and all your other attachments. Therefore, as long as you identify yourself with the body and think that you have a particular form, then you must also visualize God with a form. So you start your spiritual journey by worshipping God in a particular incarnation, having certain recognizable divine qualities. Gradually, after following this path for some time, you can change your practice to worshipping the formless aspect of the Supreme. In truth, the whole world is the form of God. Everything you see everywhere is the form of God. But to begin with, you focus on a particular form of God, one of the avatars or incarnations of God. These divine incarnations are associated with the physical universe. Corresponding to these physical forms, there are the subtle forms of the Lord, which are in the mental or the subtle aspect of the universe. The physical and mental domains have to do with the senses and the minds. Transcending both the senses and the mind is the causal universe. This causal universe is made up of the subtlest manifestation of matter, containing in potential form the seeds of all names and forms. This causal aspect is experienced every night in deep sleep. Here, the formless aspect of the Lord can be experienced. During the waking state, the effect of the mind and the senses will be very strong because they are associated with the phenomenal world. During the dream state associated with the subtle world, the senses will not hold sway over you, but the mind will be very active. In the deep sleep state associated with the causal world, the mind gets dissolved and does not comprehend the sense impressions. It is only in such a state when the mind and the senses are totally inactive that is possible to experience the formless aspect of the divinity. But this can be experienced even in the waking state when the mind becomes perfectly steady and equanimous and the senses are maintained tranquil and inactive. Then you enter the causal state while awake and experience the formless aspect of divinity. Many devotees both base their spiritual experiences only on God manifest in name and form. The form and the formless are both essential for a devotee. It is like having two legs for walking or having two wings to fly. To reach the final spiritual goal, you must have the two legs of form and formless, putting one in front of the other, with the one leg representing form taking its spot from the other, which is the formless. It is important to realize that the manifestation of the Lord with form is only transient, whereas the formless aspect of the divinity is permanent. It is ever present and unchanging. Here is a small example to illustrate this principle. Only the formless is the permanent aspect of the Lord. When you come to hear Baba give a spiritual discourse, you will be with about 1,000 others seated in the temple. This will be happening in the physical domain and may last for 1 to 2 hours. Associated with this experience is a given time and activity. But this very same experience can be re experienced even after you go home. Whenever you want to think of it, it will be there in your mind. 1,000 people seated in the temple and Sai Baba giving the discourse. In the external vision and in your experience in the waking state, you can see that all of you are sitting in the temple. What happens when you are back in your home? You find this temple will be in your heart and can be recalled to your mind at any time. You were there for 1 hour, but this can become a permanent experience for you forever. even after you leave the ashram. Having initially had the physical experience in the phenomenal world, it becomes a permanent record in the subtle universe of the mind, which can then be recalled at some later time. As you repeatedly recollect this experience and ruminate on Baba's teachings, its message becomes permanently embedded in your heart without first having had the actual experience in the hall, there would have been no permanent impression in your heart, which you could later re experience in your mind. Once the impression has been made in the mind, there is no need for actually being physically present in the temple or seeing Baba's physical form. In the same way, once you have experienced God in form, you will certainly be able to get the experience of the formless God later on. The form is momentary, whereas the formless is eternal. But the formless will live on as a permanent entity for you only after being having experienced the divine form and imprinted it on your heart through worship and devotion. Consider another example. Suppose you want to teach the word chair to a small child. If you merely utter the word chair, it does not become clear to him what its form is. However, you can show him a chair like this and ask him to look it over carefully. While he is doing this, you repeat the word chair. Then later on, whenever he sees a chair, he will remember the word associated with the form you have shown him, and he will repeat to himself chair, the form of the particular chair you used to teach him. The meaning of the word may be impermanent. That chair will change, but the word chair and the type of objects it represents will remain. Unless he sees the impermanent form, he will not learn the permanent word chair. The permanent element is understood through the impermanent one. Therefore, though divinity is formless, you first have to associate it with a particular form to understand it. Steady your mind by worshipping the divinity with form. To start with, many people do not even have a firm faith in the existence of God. Most of the time, their mind will be wavering and they will ask themselves, does God really exist? Is it really true that there is a God? An iron resolve is most essential to cultivate constant faith in God. You can travel from an unsteady mind to a steady mind with firm faith only through the process of worshipping the divinity with form. Consider one more small example. Here is a pillow stuffed with loose cotton. What covers this pillow? A piece of cloth. What is the content of this cloth? Cotton. So externally you have a piece of cloth and internally there is the cotton. But in fact the internal and the external are both cotton. The formless cotton has taken the form of thread and this thread has become cloth and this cloth is covering the formless cotton. Cloth is form and raw cotton is formless. From the formless to the form and then from the form to the formless. These are the transformations that make up divinity. To have a pillow, you cannot use the formless cotton alone. So you must first convert the cotton into cloth, and this cloth having form can then cover the formless cotton inside. In the same way, the divinity in the form and in its formless aspect are exactly the same. Both are essential through the impermanent form you become aware of the permanent formless while you still identify yourself in the terms of body consciousness and feel that who you are is related to your body. It will be impossible for you to give up the aspect of form. As your mind becomes steady, rooted in faith, and you move beyond body consciousness, you will be able to experience the permanent formless aspect of divinity. Worshipping the formless God in your heart. Traditionally, in the worship of the God with form, you may become engaged in many types of ritual worship. You may offer flowers to the Lord. You may bathe bathe his statue with holy water. You may burn incense or use forms of worship. These will give you some satisfaction. Worshipping the Lord's form externally with various sacred articles yield satisfaction. But once you establish God inside your heart, then you will worship Him through the flowers of your heart. After body consciousness and the delusion associated with it is destroyed, then the divinity that you previously worshipped externally in the form with the flowers and various articles of external worship will now become established in its formless aspect in the depths of your heart, and you will want to worship it with the sweet flowers of your feelings. This will bring true unchanging joy. As long as you are worshipping the Lord with form, you will use physical flowers such as roses, marigolds, and jasmine. These are all impermanent, and the body which performs this worship is also impermanent. But if you want to worship the formless God in your heart, then the flowers are different. Those flowers will be permanent. Those flowers are the noble qualities that you develop in your heart and offer to the Lord. They are the flowers of non-violence, of sense restraint, of truth, the patience and forbearance, of perseverance, of love and compassion, of charity and sacrifice. All these flowers are meant for inner worship. To elevate yourself to the worship of the formless principle, you will have to develop these flowers of the heart and use them in your worship. Then you will experience the ineffable and unchanging joy of the Spirit and enter the path that takes you home to your divine source, inner peace and contentment. In the 12th chapter of the Gita, Krishna taught the essential characteristics that a true devotee should possess. These are the qualities which you have to develop if you want to be loved by God. To begin with, if you want to be a devotee of God, you have to develop inner peace and a firm resolve. You should always be contented. You should never give room to worry and allow any pain to enter and disturb your heart. The great devotional scripture called the Bhagavatam gives the example of Prahlada as the ideal devotee who possessed all these qualities. When the demons were troubling Prahlada, who himself was the son of the Lord of the demons, Prahlada never allowed any pain to trouble his heart, no matter what trials and difficulties he was passing through. He just kept on repeating the name of the Lord, taking shelter in him as he his protector and savior. He never shed one tear in the midst of all these troubles. Therefore, Prahlada has been described as the one who was fully established in union with the Lord. Even though he was living in the phenomenal world and had a form, he did not allow any desires or attachments to enter his heart. Love all. For a true devotee, there should be no evil traits such as hatred, jealousy, anger, or greed. These are the main obstacles to devotion which enter your being. You must develop a sense of unity with everyone. If you develop hatred towards anyone, you will be hating the very Lord whom you worship. It is because of your inflated ego that you take action against another, in the course of which hatred, jealousy, and anger arise. Therefore, the primary warning given in the Gita says, show no hatred towards any being without uprooting the weeds from the field and preparing it for cultivation. The seeds will not yield a good crop. In the same way, without removing the weed of ego from within your heart, all attempts at spiritual practice will be useless. The most important thing to be learned from the path of devotion is that you should not only love God, but you should also love all beings. Treating everyone as God, worshipping God while harming others cannot be called a devotion. It only reveals the depths of one's ignorance. Such people will never progress on the spiritual path. In the days to come, you will learn the ways that you can develop your faith and through your good actions sanctify your life. It is By developing these desirable qualities and practicing them in your daily life, that you will call for the love and grace of the Lord. Inner inquiry, the path of wisdom. Meditation is the steady, uninterrupted practice of contemplating God. This is the principal spiritual activity taught in the Gita. Thinking of God now and then cannot be called meditation. Meditation is thinking of God at all times, under all circumstances. It is a continuous, unceasing process. Embodiment, embodiments of love. The constant remembrance of God is the method in which you continuously keep turning the mind inwards to become united with the indwelling Lord. This can correctly be called meditation. Any practice that you engage in periodically is a concentration practice. Such a practice will usually focus on a chosen object and be associated with a particular place and time. True meditation, on the other hand, goes on continuously. It is completely free of all objects and phenomena and completely transcends the element of place and time. Therefore, in the Gita, the ongoing practice of meditation has been described as superior to any type of periodic practice. But there is a practice even superior to meditation. The ultimate spiritual practice is the development of wisdom. Wisdom emerges from inner inquiry. It is the spiritual practice of looking deep into the essential nature of everything. If you faithfully pursue this inquiry, you will gradually reach the supreme state of peace and bliss. This is the unique goal of human life, a goal which all mankind will one day achieve. The three stages on the wisdom path. To reach the state of abiding inner peace, you begin by inquiring into the very heart of everything. This is the process of inner inquiry. First stage on the wisdom path, then you must make use of the deep insights you have gained by applying the spiritual teaching to every detail of your daily life. This is the second stage. If you continue with this practice unfailingly, then in time you will reach the goal of God realization and enjoy unending bliss. This is the third and final stage on the wisdom path. You can compare the first stage to the period of life when you are a student. As a student and spiritual seeker, you are most active in acquiring knowledge. When you are in the stage, you inquire into the principle which underlies everything in the universe. You try to understand the deeper meaning of the great wisdom sayings, such as that thou art. Here, that refers to the eternal divine principle we call God, and thou refers to the immortal life, self, which is the one true reality of everyone. In this first stage, you try to understand this saying, which states that the highest self and God are one and the same, and you look for this oneness in the core of everything. So you start off by seeking the unity underlying everything in existence. Then, having become aware of it, you live your life by applying this great truth to all your daily activities. This second stage can be compared to the period of life when you are employed and busy in your profession. If you have not pursued your education and earned good qualifications, you will not be able to find an appropriate position. Therefore, in the first stage, you acquire a good education and develop your knowledge so that in the next stage, you can put that education into practice and use it to do your life's work. The third stage can be likened to the later period of life when you are retired and become a pensioner. You receive a pension only after you have completed your working career. You start your career and gain employment in the first place only after you have successfully completed your education and acquired qualification. There are the three stages in your path during through life. Namely, first is the stage when you are a student, then there is the stage when you are a professional, and lastly there is the stage when you are a pensioner. Similarly, on the path of wisdom, You start as a seeker, then you become a practitioner, and finally you become a wise, illumined man. In this final stage, you enjoy a complete peace of mind and realize the unity of all the creation. To permanently acquire peace of mind and the state of unending inner joy, you first have to enter into the stage of inquiry and give up all attachments to the world. These days, so called spiritual seekers are first entering into the stage of attachment and later they try to enter the stage of inner inquiry. They call each other brother and sister and aspire to practice unity, which at the same time taking on new worldly attachments. At best, they can only be described as part-time devotees. The Gita does not condone such part-time devotion. The Gita teaches complete surrender by offering oneself and everything one has to God. God is the master of time. In order to experience the principle of complete surrender, you need to become aware of time and how it exercises total power over all that is changing and yet how it is utterly powerless over the unchanging divinity, which is its master. God is not subject to time. He not only is not under the spell of time, but he keeps time under his control. The one who is bound by time is man. The one who transcends time is God. The one who is mortal is man. The one who is immortal is God. Only when you take shelter in divinity will you be able to transcend this element of time. Time consumes man, whereas God consumes time itself. It is time which is responsible for man's progress or man's decline, for the promotion of his good or his fall into evil, for his earning merit or storing demerit. Therefore, in the ancient scriptures, we find this prayer: O God, you are the very embodiment of time. Please help me to sanctify my life and spend all my time in remembrance of you so that I may safely reach your lotus feet. The entire world is inextricably enmeshed in the grip of time. It is not possible to fight against this element of time. Time does not wait for anyone. You are bound by time. Time is not bound by you. Time can be compared to a great flowing river. All living beings are washed away by this flow of time. If you are washed away by a flood, you cannot take protection and shelter in someone or something which is also being washed away. You, as well as the people and objects in which you try to find security, are all being washed away by the flood of time. If you seek to gain protection from something that is itself being washed away, it is like a blind person following another blind person. In the end, they both get lost. But if you were to be helped by someone who is standing securely on the bank, you would surely be saved. The one on the bank who is not caught up in the flood of time is God. If you take refuge in God, you will be able to free yourself from all the troubles and problems associated with time. God has proclaimed the principle of surrender and emphasized its importance by telling man, "O man, you are being washed away by the flood of time. The only one who can shelter you is myself. Take refuge in me, and I will save you." When you obey this divine command and offer yourself, your wealth, your property, your entire family at the Lord's feet and surrender yourself completely, then you will surely be saved. The veil of illusion. At first, it is difficult to experience this principle of surrender because there is a very big veil between you and God. Due to this veil, you are easily subject to doubt and confusion, and then you feel yourself unable to surrender completely. This veil is illusion. What is the meaning of illusion? Illusion refers to that which does not exist. When you are under the spell of illusion, you imagine that which does not really exist to exist, and you imagine that which really exists to not exist. What never changes really exists and is true. What changes does not really exist and is not true. The one thing which always exists, which is true and unchanging, is God, the one without a second. The world, then thought to be devoid of God, which we seen as constantly changing. Since it is changing, it cannot be true and therefore cannot really exist. But in this, you are not seeing the world correctly. When you are under the spell of illusion, you see the world as separate from God. You do not see the divinity as the principle underlying everything in the world, and as a result, you become afraid and find it impossible to surrender yourself completely. It is like seeing a rope and thinking that it is a snake, but there is no snake there at all. You are subjected to fear and tension by imagining that there is a snake where there really is no snake at all. What is the reason for this fear? Imagining things which really do not exist as existing is the cause of fear. This feeling is responsible for all your troubles. If you were to see all this in your awareness, you would find that there is only a rope. There is no snake. Then you would have no fear whatsoever. You would not be afraid to reach out to it, to hold it and to play with it, because you would really that all there is only a rope. You are subject to many sorrows because you forget the fact that the entire world is the embodiment of God. It is not just the world as you think it is. You see the world only from the phenomenal point of view. You are not looking at it through the eyes of inquiry. If you were to look at the world correctly, you would realize that it is a stream of continuous change. This ongoing, uninterrupted flow of change is the basic characteristics of the phenomenal world. But within and governing that flow of change is the one divine principle which is forever unchanging. It can be likened to a river. The water in the river will flow continuously and give rise to the apparent effect of a steady stream flowing without end. But at any given period of time and at any particular place along the river, the particles of water rushing by will all the different. Some will be muddy, some will contain rocks, some will be foamy, some will be pure water. Although the flow is continuous, the exact makeup of the time is constantly changing. We see that the river is a combination of both changing and unchanging elements. In a similar way, beings which are the expressions of life are born and die, although they come and they go. There is a continuity of life in the world. Life which goes on continuously can be considered to be truth, whereas living beings which are born and die and are constantly changing represent untruth. Therefore, the changing expressions of life are untrue. But life itself, which is a steady stream whose essence is the divinity, is true. The world as a river of truth and untruth. That is why the world has been likened to a river where reality has become associated with unreality or change. You can consider it a stream of changing truth, truth which is qualified and not fully true. The world is a combination of pure truth, which remains the same and never changes, and untruth, which deals with things that are constantly changing. The wisdom teachings have described this state as truth untruth, namely a mixture or combination wherein both truth and untruth coexist. Spiritual practice is the process whereby you separate the truth from the untruth and retain the truth. You see the illusion that the world exists separately from yourself and God for what it is, namely untruth. Once recognized as untruth, you are no longer deluded by it, and the truth, which is the unity of God, man, and world, stands unrevealed. Ignorance, nature, world, illusion, mind, Maya are all synonymous. They are all the illusory power of God, thinking that things exist which do not really exist, and coming under their spell is illusion. A saint summarized this: God is true, but the world is false. You must understand this statement correctly. What it means is that our mistaken perception and experience of the world is untrue. The world itself, in a sense, is true. God is the one unchanging basis of this world of change. When you examine this in some depth, you discover that the world is truly not world but the divinity itself. Hold on to God alone. In the Gita, Krishna told Arjuna, Arjuna, you are subjecting yourself to this element of time. You are getting yourself caught up in its flow and you are going far, far away from me. Surrender yourself to me and all your sorrows will soon be removed. When you are associated with God, when you are near Him, illusion cannot harm you. Here is a small example for this. In the expensive homes of the wealthy, there will often be a watchdog guarding the gate to keep people out. This dog is not like a street dog. It has been brought up by its owners with great affection and has been carefully trained. This dog does not go on barking whenever it sees people walking or moving about. It starts barking only when someone comes near the gate and tries to get in. When they see the dog and hear the barking, most visitors will quickly leave the gate and go away. Others, however, who have taken a firm resolve to meet the owner of the house will continue to stand there and loudly call out to the owner of the house. Eventually, the owner, hearing all the commotion at the gate, will look out from his upstairs window to see who is standing at the gate. Once the owner recognizes the person waiting there to be his friend, he will come down, go to the gate, let his friend in, and take him upstairs into the house. When this apparent stranger who had been waiting at the gate turns out to be a friend of the master of the house and goes with him, the dog will no longer bark at him or try to harm him. The dog now knows that this person is being allowed in by the owner himself. Illusion can be compared to this dog. It guards the gate of the liberation and bliss. If a person comes who is not a friend of the master of the house, if he has nothing to do there but insist on coming in through the gate, the dog will catch hold of him. Fearing the consequences of being accosted by the dog, most people will run away. In a similar fashion, most people, as soon as they experience some difficulties on the spiritual path, will choose to turn away instead of persisting on their quest, undaunted by difficulties, and so they do not reach their goal and thus continue to be buffeted by the spell of illusion. But a real devotee, who in this example is the person with a strong determination to reach the owner of the house, does not mind the dog at all. He remains at the gate and attracts the attention of the master and stays there until the master comes out. To such a persistent one waiting at the gate, even the barking of the dog, even the pain caused by illusion is helpful because the pain draws the attention and compassion of the master inside. The master turns his gaze on the devotee, recognizes him, and takes him into the house. Therefore, only the one with courage and strong, resolute nature who has decided to remain there no matter how ferociously the dog is barking will get to see the master and be able to enter this palace of ultimate peace. Conquer your senses. The five senses and the senses objects we perceive with them represent this dog of illusion, which will distract you and keep you from reaching God. It is for this reason that Krishna told Arjuna, Arjuna, you are attached to or so many sense objects, therefore you are ruffled by events. You have not been able to control your senses and you have not been able to develop concentration. Therefore, you have not been able to establish the divinity in your heart. Continue to cultivate your practice of constantly turning your mind back to God dwelling in your heart. Then you will gain concentration of mind. Only when you have concentration of mind will you be able to fully surrender to God at all times and in all places. Always think of God. Whatever work you are doing, think of God. Remember God with love. Remember God with faith. Even when you are waging a war, Think first of God, then fight. This is not an ordinary war. This fight you are now becoming involved in is not like a quarrel between you and some other individuals. What you are fighting most of all is your own weakness, your bad habits, all your limitations and frailties. With warm thoughts of love for the divinity dwelling in your heart, wage this inner war and win. Remember, you are not just fighting a war against others, you are fighting your own inner sense organs. So do not quit until you have achieved victory, until you have conquered your senses and fully mastered them. In an early age, Prahlada also spoke of this inner fight to his father, the powerful demon king. He said, Father, you have won many wars and have gained lordship over numerous worlds, but you have not been able to win a victory over your own senses. By winning all the worlds outside, you have become a powerful king, but only when you can control your own senses will you be king of the whole universe. If you keep being defeated by your own inner senses, how can you ever win a lasting victory against your enemies outside? When you win over your inner enemies, you can easily win over the external ones also. When when is this possible? Only when you surrender yourself completely to the divinity, you say, my objects, myself, my people. As long as you have such feelings, it will not be possible for you to surrender. These are all attachments associated with the physical realm. You will have to gain mastery over not only the physical but over the mental realm as well. Finally, you will have to gain entry into the spiritual realm. Once you have faith, fully surrender yourself and enter the spiritual realm, everything will be taken care of automatically and you will no longer be bothered by any burdens and cares. Give your burden to God. When you take a train journey, upon reaching the railway station, you have to transport your luggage via a porter or by one means or another. If there is no one to help you, you have to carry the luggage yourself. But once you enter the train, you can put the luggage down anywhere you like. Then you can relax and there is no further bother with the luggage. The train will carry you and your luggage nevertheless. There are some fools who will sit in the train and carry their luggage on their heads. Those are the ones who have been blessed with God's grace but still doubt and continue to follow their own independent will. They have not surrendered fully. Once you surrender yourself fully to the Lord and offer everything to that that is to be done as well as when it is to be done and how it is to be done at the Lord's feet. He will take care of everything. To achieve this level of surrender, there can be no trace of ego left. There should be no sense of yourself remaining. This has been shown in a particular clear manner in the Ramayana by Lakshmana, the brother of Rama. Let us pick up the story when Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana, during their exile in the forest, were moving through a mountainous area. As is the Lord's nature, he always loves to carry on some playful sport. He is the perfect actor. He never has any sorrow or pain whatsoever, but sometimes he will act as though he has these feelings. Whenever God comes down in human form, he acts this way in order to conduct himself in a natural way as man. The human form is taken on by him so that he can easily accessible to people. On that particular day, Rama, the incarnation of God, acted as though he was very tired. He was removing the sweat from his brow and telling Lakshmana, Lakshmana, I am so tired, I don't think I will be able to go any further. Please put up a hut somewhere nearby so that we can take a little rest. Lakshmana asked Rama, brother, where shall we have this cottage? Rama said, you can decide for yourself which place will be most appropriate and then put it up. Lakshmana responded, Rama, Rama, what have I done? What is my error? What sins have I committed to hear these words? Please let me know Why you have spoken to me like this? Now Rama knew the mind of Lakshmana, and so he knew why Lakshmana was saying this. But in order to help Sita understand the level of Lakshmana's surrender, Rama said, Lakshmana, please tell me what is troubling you. What have I said that has made you feel so much pain? Lakshmana replied, I have given up everything. I have given up wife, mother, father, kingdom, everything. I have come along with you feeling that you are the father, that Sita is the mother, and that wherever you are in your beautiful capital city of Ayodhya, I have come only to implement your will. I have given up my own individual will, and now you ask me to construct a hut and choose the place in which to build it. Your command is my only thought. I have no other thoughts than that. Whatever is your will, I will do. My only duty is to obey you. My only goal, truly my everything is you. You alone must tell me where the hut is to be put. Sita realized the depth of Lakshmana's devotion and surrender. She turned to Rama and asked him to relieve Lakshmana's distress by designating the site for the hut himself. Surrender fully to God. The basic lesson of this story is that man should not have any desire separate from the one desire to fully surrender to God. Everything belongs to God and only to God. Surrender means implicity im- implicitly following the commands given to you by the Lord, whose directions will be clearly heard when He is enshrined in your heart. Surrender is the basis of the declaration. Come and sit in my train, and I will look after you. Let go of your ego sense and desire. Don't carry your luggage on your head and suffer. In this context, Krishna taught surrender as the highest and most important stage of devotion. Once you have surrendered yourself fully to the Lord, you will gain His grace. Wherever you are, be it in a town, in a village, in a forest, or in the sky, I'll be your refuge. Come and surrender to me. That is the command of the Lord, and that is also His promise. Once you are His, He will shelter you and protect you from all harm. But surrender does not mean giving up your discriminating faculty. You must discern what are desires and what is truly divine, and surrender all your worldly desires, offering them to the divine. Make your every effort to discover the right way to surrender yourself and thereby sanctify your life and reach the goal. Find God in your own heart. The Lord stated in the Gita, only when you renounce all selfishness and attachment, only when you treat joy and sorrow with an equal mind and practice forbearance in all circumstances, will you become my devotee and very dear to me. Embodiments of love, to have an equal mind, to be free of attachments and concern for yourself and your family is difficult for ordinary spiritual seekers, particularly for householders. Such equanimity of mind and detachment is almost impossible. They are able to worship God through the various types of spiritual practices which have been prescribed in the scriptures. But for them to destroy their ego and remove all sense of I-ness and my-ness would be very difficult. What is this so? Why is that so? It is difficult to eliminate the ego as long as you differentiate your own will from the command and will of the Lord. You have doubts and are unable to surrender because you see others and the world as separate from God. It is only when you recognize that God is dwelling in all people everywhere in the form of an ever luminous light shining in the temple of their hearts that you will be able to eliminate your egoism and surrender fully to God. Once you recognize the all pervasive unity of the Lord, you will have no difficulty following Him. Know that the self effulgent flame of God's presence, which resides in all people, also resides in you. The one who protects all people is an integral part of your own form. The indwelling God. From time immemorial, the inquiry has been going on whether or not God exists. Once you have convinced yourself that He exists, the next step is to find the way to reach Him. Just as was true in ancient times, this problem of how and where to find God has become a perplexing question for mankind today. To solve this problem, numerous sages made a determined effort to use all their skills and penance to find the solution. These sages revealed where they searched and how they came to know about the existence of the effulgent Lord. They declared to the world at large, O citizens, we have been able to perceive the transcendental principle which exists beyond this visible and created world. It will not be found in the external world or in outer space, but only within your own inner self. It is there in your inner vision, within your soul, in the sacred heart, inside your deepest self. It is there that the blissful Lord resides. This was their great discovery that God dwells within the body itself. God is the imperishable one who lies within the imperishable body. The body is inert, it does not know itself. In the Gita, God has been called the knower of the body and the one who gives consciousness to the body. To penetrate through the veils of ignorance that hide your truth, you must make a determined effort to discover the immortal Lord residing resp- resplendently in your mortal body. Not only must you find the Lord installed in your own heart and the bodies of other creatures, but you must also find Him installed in every object, in everything. He is the indweller of all the five elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth. He is the very basis of creation. To find a diamond, you must dig deep within the earth. You will not find it hanging outside on a tree. In the same way, you will not find this most valuable diamond, which is the Lord, lying around somewhere outside, easily visible at all. With the help of the teachings of great souls, you will have to make the effort to find God within. The body is not an ordinary thing, it is the temple of God. It is a chariot which carries the Lord. In the world, you can be thought of as a grand village. The Lord is being taken in procession everywhere in this chariot called the body. Within the body is pure consciousness. Since the body is the temple of the Lord, it is not proper to be indifferent towards it, to neglect it, or to use it in inappropriate or unrighteous manner. The body must be used only to perform activities which are sacred and selfless. You must take good care of the body and sanctify it by using it to do holy tasks. The body is inert, no doubt, but within it lives the principle which is pure consciousness. This body may be compared to a boat which will help you cross the ocean of worldly existence. This body was not so easily obtained by you because of innumerable merits and numerous births in other forms. You have been able to obtain this human body. To use it improperly is to waste all the merits you have earned in all those countless lives. It is your extraordinary good fortune to have been able to get this birth as a human being. Therefore, this sacred boat which can take you to your destination has to be used very carefully so that you can cross the ocean of worldly existence safely. In this ocean, there are terrible crocodiles and all kinds of terrifying creatures which are very harmful to you. These menacing crocodiles are the six inner enemies of man in the form of lust, anger, greed, attachment, pride, and jealousy. They inhabit this unfathomable ocean of worldly existence at every level. The water of this ocean of world existence, which supports all these horrendous creatures, is made up of a mixture of opposites like joy and grief, attraction and repulsion. When you are in this ocean of life, it is very difficult to say when you will obtain happiness and when you will suffer pain. When you are beast with so many crocodiles, when you are beset with so many crocodiles, the very best means for completing this journey safely is to see the unity in everything. You have to firmly believe that the divine principle, the Godhead in the form of the self effulgent flame, resides in everything and in everything. Once you recognize the presence of God dwelling in everyone, once the unity is recognized in all this apparent diversity, then you will no longer be able to hate anyone. That's why in the Gita, injunction show no hatred towards any being is given first place. The various acts of ritual worship, such as singing devotional songs and repeating the holy name, which at one time may have seemed so important to you, will seem very small in comparison. Once you recognize this principle of God dwelling in every heart, it is only when you are ignorant of this great truth that you consider the various devotional practices as a permanent in your spiritual life. However, until you have mastered the art of swimming through, there is a need to use various flotation aids for sport. Once you have learned to swim, these aids will no longer be necessary. In the same way, all the various ritual practices are necessary until you truly understand the meaning of the Gita. Once you have comprehended the sweet essence of the Gita, all these rituals will appear quite trivial. See God in everything. In the chapter on devotion in the Gita, the noble characteristics that endear a devotee to God are described. It is emphasized there that once the inner enemies of man are brought under control, these characteristics will naturally blossom forth in the individual. Can this ever be done? Easily, yes. These six enemies can be readily conquered once you recognize the truth that the one God resides in all of the five elements everywhere, and that it is He who activates all being. Before you recognize this and experience it, you will not realize true satisfaction in anything you undertake. If you keep some salt in your mouth, then even if you try to swallow some sweet juice, you will still get the taste of salt. First, you have to get rid of the salt and wash your mouth well, then you will be able to taste the sweetness. When the salt is gone, you can enjoy the full, unpolluted sweetness of the juice you have taken in. Similarly, it is only when you are able to conquer the ego by removing all the bad traits which have become an integral part of you, that you will be able to enjoy the sweetness of compassion, the sweetness of sacrifice, the sweetness of charity, the sweetness of sympathy, and the sweetness of divine love. To begin with, try to understand what true devotion really means. Devotion means an all absorbing love for God. When you develop devotion and turn all your love towards God, everything that is necessary will be added unto you. You will develop the capacity to sacrifice yourself. You will expand in love. Love is the very life breath of a human being. Without love, you cannot live. Love is a very sacred quality, as was referred to earlier. A great sage in the ancient time told his wife, all the love that you have is really for the sake of your higher love. Love is not for the sake of others, but only for the higher self. But all too frequently, through delusion, this sacred love for the Atma, the one self, is diverted towards the body. Everywhere in the world, we find this disease of identification with the body. The diseases of mankind. Many of the enjoyments you experience in life are really just the relief you feel when you temporarily soothe the pains of a disease you are suffering. For example, you think that taking food is an enjoyment, but it is really only in medicine. Food is the medicine for the disease of hunger. When you give the medicine, the disease is temporarily forgotten. You cook many varieties of delicious food and consider the taste of these prepared dishes to be most enjoyable, but that is not the real purpose for which you take food. As you know, medicines are sometimes given in the form of a mixture which contains some sweetener to make it more palatable. In the same way, to treat the disease of hunger, there will be a meal containing a mixture of ingredients, some of which are particularly flavorful and pleasant to the taste. But in the final analysis, the meal can only be thought of as a form of medicine to treat the disease of hunger that afflicts you. After you have eaten, the symptoms of the disease disappear. Similarly, when you take some cool water, the symptoms of the disease of thirst disappear. We have previously discussed the six inner enemies of man: lust, anger, greed, attachment, and pride and jealousy. They can also be described as desire, hatred, possessiveness, infatuation, arrogance, and envy. These are the most deep seated diseases of mankind. It is only when you engage in practices which serve as medicines to contract these diseases, that they will diminish and disappear. During your whole time, you have been deluded into thinking that you are enjoying different types of pleasures, but in fact, you are afflicted with these diseases. Until you recognize that the resident of the body is God, you will continue to be burdened by these diseases and the sufferings they bring. Seek the Lord inside your own body. All spiritual practices can only be done with the help of the body. All the education that you have acquired has been obtained by means of the body. The magnificence and extraordinary characteristics of God have been learned through the facility of the body. Taking the body as the basis, you have to make an all-out effort to see the Lord inside it. Do not keep thinking that God resides somewhere in another world. He actually is present in the body itself. Sin does not exist in some distant world as far away. It depends upon the actions that you perform with your body. Both your merit and demerit are the result of the actions you perform with the help of your body. You have to make an incessant search, a serious attempt to find God inside your own body. Only when you knock at the door will the master inside open it. Even your own mother will serve you food only when you ask for her for it. Therefore, you will have to ask and go on asking, knock on the door and go on knocking, search and go on searching, seek and go on seeking. If you search for God within you with all earnestness, you will surely be able to find Him. If you go to a room where a great number of articles are stored, it is only if you search carefully that you will be able to find the particular article for which you are looking. Without searching, you will never find the article you want. Therefore, it is said, seek, seek, and it shall be found. Knock, knock, and the doors will be opened. Perhaps you feel that you have already been knocking at the door for a long time and it has not opened for you. But find out if you have been knocking at the right door. Are you knocking at the door of liberation or are you knocking at the door of attachment? Are you knocking at the door where God is residing or are you knocking at the door where the devil is dwelling? Whom you are approaching, in whom you are taking shelter? Are you asking the most merciful one, the one who comes in human form and holds out his own life as an example? And are you asking the mother of the universe? Are you asking for food from her or are you seeking for food from the devil? You may even be looking at the Lord, but you are not asking for the divinity itself. No doubt you are praying to God, but you are asking for petty material things and worldly things. You are at the wish fulfilling tree and you are asking for trivial coffee powder. You have to pray for the wish fulfilling tree to grant you the transcendental principle which will fill you forever with the eternal bliss. Your devotion must go on increasing and progressing. Keep in mind the firm belief that God is residing inside your own body. If you want to seek and search for the Lord who is residing inside you, you have to turn your vision inward. How should you aspire for the Lord? You have to cry the way a calf cries for its mother who has left it and gone off with the herd. You have to cry like a chaste woman who has lost her husband and wails in pain at the separation. You have to cry in the way that a childless couple implores and pleads with the God for a child. This is how you should pray to the Lord, full of devotion, longing to realize His presence with you. Harmonious all your thoughts and words and deeds. But today, most of your prayers are filled with pompous words devoid of feeling. Inside the mind, there is one thing, on your lips, there is something else. It is only when you synchronize the thoughts in your mind with the words in your mouth. What your words can turn into prayer and become effective. Then you must put your prayers into practice. When your activities in daily life are coordinated with your thoughts and words, then your prayers can become worship. And when you achieve full unity in thought, word, and action, then you become a great soul. You have to examine yourself to see whether you are following this path of harmony in thought and word and deed. When you examine yourself honestly, you may find that most of the time these three thought, word, and deed will be going off in three different directions without any unity between them. When thoughts are different, words are different, and actions are different, you have the characteristics of a demon, not of a saint. Such disharmony will not benefit you nor endear you to the law. Thank you, my Sai brother and sister, for patiently watching and hearing this video. Thank you so much. Jai Sai Ram. Thank you. Thank you. Please like, comment, and share the video and subscribe my channel. Om Sai Ram. Om